it's amazing how those two worlds of engineering and psychology kind of work, right? Mm. You are, as an engineer, trying to figure things out, right? Figure out how to either build, connect, what have you. And a lot of that is based upon observing failure, right? And designing against failure.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes service, right? Service level or LRFD, factored safety, call it what you will, but you're designing against a limit state, right?
Yeah.
And psychology is kind of the understanding of the human aspect of it. Mm-hmm. When it's stressed, when it's performing well, and it has a huge influence on our ability to think about creative problems, non-creative problems. It's all part of that ability to connect, communicate, whatever you need in order to do the engineering.
Right.
Yeah, so it really is kind of fundamental to understand people when doing the engineering too. It is funny how that works out.
What's interesting is, like, until you said that, I'd never put it together like that in my head, but for some reason it seems to make sense in that way, because, like, from the time for me leaving school, it was like, okay, you've got this rigorous training where you go through a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like, you're supposed to do, like, all your core classes. That's like all engineers, like the electrical engineers do it, the mechanicals, civils, environmentals, like whatever other, like software engineers. We take some of like the same core classes, but then when you get into like the higher level stuff, it's really pushing your buttons in some ways where you wonder half the times, are the teachers conspiring? Are they just like meeting up and just be like, oh, let's see how we can mess with them, like, this week. How can we really, like, just put them right there on the edge where they just want to quit? Or,
that Asher kid, he's got it coming to him. Let's get him today.
Yeah. But it's like just seeing that and just kind of thinking about how much went into really building you as a person, but also, like you said, like, you study a material and you say, like, okay, obviously steel has this strength, concrete has this strength, and you know to what point it fails. And then knowing that you put in assurances as warning signs to say, okay, if the building starts to like creak or lean this way, you have in more than enough time to run out of there, get yourself to safety before everything just comes tumbling down. But now from like a psychological perspective, looking at it as it relates to, like, knowing, as a lot of people are saying now, it's like you have trauma, for instance, or like triggers that people see on a regular basis, or just kind of having to go back in your mind and see, like, okay, this is how childhood was, and then this came after childhood, and then things that are still bothering me I haven't dealt with yet. So it's like you got to go and, like, okay, how do I build back up the person that I was, or build back up the person that I want to be, until, like, you become more resilient. And it's not like, oh, you don't want no failures to come your way, but you've got to deal with the failures and the fall downs and the letdowns after they come, because it's like, regardless of how you look at it, they're going to come. And that just you tying those two things together really is helping me kind of put a bow on the end of the year, as I look forward to just be like, there have been stressors, of course, but now, like, having taken the time to really unpack some things and deal with them one-on-one as I needed to, it makes it more clear.
I have a feeling we've had a very similar experience. I've gone through I'm going to give you a little bit of my story right now. I've recently gone through a divorce where, at some point my family and I were my immediate family were very much separated. Mm. And at that time, when you're going through that, you can feel like the person that you are, that you identified with, you've got a few pillars that are standing, holding up that house, and suddenly they've fallen, right? And they feel like they've fallen because you've suddenly removed a giant chunk of who you established yourself to be. And you've got to now say, okay, what am I going to do now? And you go through a struggle of, how am I going to cope with this? What things am I doing right? What things am I doing wrong? And you are going to look at yourself with this eye of, God, I really shouldn't have done that. To me, a person that is going through a major depressive episode or anxiety or is actually a very intelligent person. Mm. But they've taken that intelligence and instead of whittling it towards a problem external of them, it now gets more internalized. And when that happens, it almost takes it takes some forgiveness of that person, no matter what has happened in the situation or no matter what you're going through. It takes some willingness to try to build back up what that original image was. I will say that in going through that process for myself, what helped me to kind of understand what I was going through and try to help the healing or the rebuilding process was, it's actually just a little micro story. Sometime late 2019, I had gotten a new job opportunity with my current employer. And it came at a very stressful time, a very sort of rewarding time for me, but a very stressful time. My second child was born in June of that year. And I was working towards a major milestone project for myself that was very important to me because not only did it kind of represent a part of how I grew up, but something that I really wanted to do. And as I'm now venturing off to this new firm, it was like I wanted to be the greatest dad, I wanted to be the greatest worker, and I wanted to be, lead provider for my family. I wanted all three of those.
Yeah.
And you somehow have to balance all that, right? And so last day of my job, I had stayed up till 3 o'clock that morning. I was no stranger to lack of sleep at that point after waking up with the kid to hand her off to be fed and turning in the papers